Hi, this is Ben Mickens. Today I'll be talking about the brain and chronic stress. An overview of the presentation. First, I'll briefly cover the structure of the brain. Then I'll discuss stress and cortisol production. Next, I'll highlight some effects of chronic stress. And then lastly, I'll review some strategies for effective stress reduction. The brain is divided into areas called lobes, and each lobe has a specific function. The frontal lobe is involved with motor control, problem solving, and speech production. The parietal lobe is involved with touch perception and body orientation and sensory discrimination. The occipital lobe is involved with sight and visual reception and visual interpretation. And the temporal lobe is involved with auditory processing, language comprehension, and memory and information retrieval. The brain is divided into two hemispheres, and then each of these hemispheres, the lobes are located on both sides. At the bottom of the brain, we have the brainstem, and it's involved with involuntary responses. And then next to that, we have the cerebellum, and it's involved with balance and coordination. The concept of the true brain, it's a model developed in the 1960s by an American neuroscientist named Paul MacLean. It is based on the evolutionary view of brain development. The reptilian brain, outlined in red, also known as the brainstem, it's considered the most primitive, and it's involved with instinctive responses that involve harm, avoid harm, and ensure safety. It's mostly involved with sensations and impulses. The next level is the mammalian brain. At the limbic level, or the mammalian level, the limbic brain, and its focus is on approaching rewards to attain satisfaction. It's mostly involved with feelings and implicit memory. And then lastly, we have the primate level or the neocortex, and that focuses on higher level processes such as thinking, language, and establishing a connection with others. And within that limbic brain, there's a structure called the amygdala. And the amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure on the medial side of the temporal lobe. And what it does is it compares the environment to stored memory. Remember those implicit memories. If there is a perceived threat, the amygdala stimulates the hypothalamus to release corticotrophin releasing hormone. And then this corticotrophin releasing hormone stimulates the secretion of adrenocorticotropic hormone. And this adrenocorticotropic hormone acts on the adrenal gland and causes the release of cortisol. Now, cortisol is released when you're stressed to prepare for a threat. This is also known as the fight or flight response. It causes liver and fat cells to release glucose into the bloodstream to provide an immediate source of energy. The heart rate and blood pressure are increased to provide blood to the extremities. Also, cortisol, it makes you more alert and inhibits sleep. So traditionally, this was a natural response to predators. However, now the threat to survival, it's not what it used to be. We have advancements in civilization have decreased the sources of any real danger. However, the amygdala, it still operates as it was designed. And so it is triggered by these perceived dangers that have associations with some past memories that are related to previously emotionally charged situations. And so what's happening is we have these long-term stress reactions. They're being set off by situations that are not based in reality, but they're based on emotional thoughts and beliefs. And over time, this chronic stress can have deleterious effects.
Are you sleeping restlessly, feeling irritable or moody, forgetting little things, and feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Don't worry, we've all been there. You're probably just stressed out. Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress, like being overworked or having arguments at home, can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions, right down to the level of your genes. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things, and also set the stage for more serious mental problems like depression and eventually Alzheimer's disease. The effects of stress may filter right down to your brain's DNA. An experiment showed that the amount of nurturing a mother rat provides its newborn baby plays a part in determining how that baby responds to stress later in life. The pups of nurturing moms turned out less sensitive to stress because their brains developed more cortisol receptors, which stick to cortisol and dampen the stress response. The pups of negligent moms had the opposite outcome, and so became more sensitive to stress throughout life. These are considered epigenetic changes, meaning that they affect which genes are expressed without directly changing the genetic code. And these changes can be reversed if the moms are swapped. But there's a surprising result. The epigenetic changes caused by one single mother rat were passed down to many generations of rats after her. In other words, the results of these actions were inheritable. It's not all bad news though. There are many ways to reverse what cortisol does to your stressed brain. The most powerful weapons are exercise and meditation, which involves breathing deeply and being aware and focused on your surroundings. Both of these activities decrease your stress and increase the size of the hippocampus, thereby improving your memory. So don't feel defeated by the pressures of daily life. Get in control of your stress before it takes control of you.
So not only does the chronic stress affect the brain, but it also affects the body. Chronically high stress levels depress immunity, interfere with growth, and increase the risk of type 2 diabetes by changing how the body reacts to insulin. Also, this chronic stress promotes obesity. The body, it begins to crave energy-rich foods to recover from the stress response, and this could actually lead to stress eating. Then the increased glucose in the bloodstream and the stress eating, they both lead to increased insulin production. And this increased insulin decreases the brain's response to a hormone called leptin. And leptin is secreted by fat cells and it tells the body, I'm full. So as a result, the stressed out brain, it thinks you're starving. So it actually activates reflexes that make you hungry. And then at the same time, activates reflexes that make you less active. Not only that, we have these elevated levels of stress and cortisol leading to sleep deprivation, what actually elevates a hormone called ghrelin. And then ghrelin, it's produced by the stomach and pancreas. And what it does is it tells the body, I'm hungry. So then we have the body is once again wanting more food. So the chronic stress, it not only has physical effects, but it can also affect the other dimensions of wellness. This is the wellness wheel, and it's a visual representation of the dimensions of wellness. However, instead of being a wheel, it functions more like a web. And all of these dimensions of wellness, they're interconnected and they're important to a balanced lifestyle. And what we need to do is we need to work in different aspects of our lives to increase our overall sense of well being. Because when you lose balance within or between these dimensions on the wheel, your sense of well being decreases. And once again, you're going to experience this distress. And going around the wheel, we can compare and see what happens with the stress response. Emotionally, the chronic stress, it's going to diminish our ability to effectively cope with life's challenges. Chronic stress may cause us to sabotage our most cherished relationships in a social context. From a spiritual realm, we're going to have difficulty establishing any kind of peace and harmony in our lives. From environmental, we may neglect our environment, or we may even refrain from engaging in new intellectual pursuits due to the overwhelming stress. And lastly, stress, it may hamper our ability to get enjoyment from our occupation. And unfortunately for some, their occupation may actually be the source of their stress. And speaking of occupation, the term occupational deprivation, it's a state of prolonged preclusion from engagement in occupations of necessity and or meaning due to factors which stand outside of the control of the individual. And what happens is this chronic stress, it may diminish someone's desire to occupy their time with engaging activities, find meaning in their life, or even build the healthy social network, as we pointed out within the wellness wheel. And so this may lead to a cascade of negative effects that alters the person's external environment in such a way that it actually prevents them from engaging in any kind of worthwhile occupational pursuits. All is not lost, however. Here are some healthy ways to cope with stress. So one, you want to take care of yourself. So we want to eat healthy, exercise, get plenty of sleep. If you can, try to take a time out and just de-stress yourself. Talking to others helps. Once again, trying to establish that social network. You want to share your problems, how you're feeling, and coping with a parent, friend, counselor, doctor, or pastor, just a trusted loved one. Make sure you avoid drugs and alcohol. They may seem to help, but they actually create additional problems and they increase the stress you're already feeling. Also, if you can, you want to take a break from the news if that's causing you stress, or take a break from listening or watching TV. And then here, in the following video, Dr. John Veltheim, he's the founder of the Body Talk system, and he's going to explain and demonstrate a Cortices technique. And this is an effective technique that balances the lobes of the brain, as well as those internal structures, the neuron brain as well.
The Cortices technique is one of the most used and most essential techniques of the Body Talk system, although it can be used with other systems as well, because basically the Cortices technique is a very powerful way of reducing the stress in the brain. Our brain gets stress from all the different stresses in life of many different forms, and we find that within the brain, that stress can cause basically like circuit breakers to break down. The communication, particularly between the two hemispheres, gets compromised. And this gets the brain to underfunction and you to feel more dull-headed and not as clear. And it can weaken your brain's ability to even keep your body going and healthy. So in Body Talk, we've developed a technique that is designed to actually reset those communication pathways so as that they start functioning properly again. And this reset can last a fair while, although we believe that because the average person with a lot of stress, they probably should use it frequently. I would suggest even daily for a while until you're feeling very stress-free, and then you can lengthen it out. And should be used on everyone in the family. It's a home remedy. It is part of the Body Talk system, but this is a very safe system just to use at home. And if you're doing it on a regular basis, you're just going to find your stress levels reduce dramatically, and you're going to feel much better in yourself. In fact, some people are feeling better even after they've done it a few times. And so it's sort of a preventative medicine and a maintenance of handling one of the biggest problems we have in our societies at the moment, and that's high stress levels and the way they're affecting brain function. So this is very, very powerful one to help reduce the stress in your home, your family, and in your body so it can heal better. Okay, it's a simple technique. I'm going to demonstrate it, and I'll demonstrate it a couple of times. You might want to do it with me. We're going to use contact on the head, and we're going to use the tapping technique. Now, the tapping technique is one of the original things in Body Talk. It's where we tap. We can tap very lightly, and we set up what they call a solitone, or a standing wave, and the effect of that actually goes down and brings about changes in those circuits and helps to heal them. When combined with us bridging the hemispheres with our hand, which is also a magnetic field, and by bridging there and tapping, we reset the circuits. But we're going to do it in the whole head in a systematic way. Now, when we tap, we're tapping and getting the information going into the brain. But of course, nowadays in physiology, we know that the heart has a brain as well, and the intestinal tract has a brain. And they're quite big brains, and they have a very important function. So we include them in the tapping. So although we're only using the hand on the head, we are going to include the other brains in the tapping. So we'll demonstrate it. It's just a systematic thing. We're going to start with the hand at the base of the skull, at the back, with bridging across, and then we simply do light tapping. It's not heavy tapping. You don't have to belt the person, just light tapping there on the brain, making sure you have at least some fingers either side of the center point. And then you're going to tap over the sternum for the heart brain, and then tap around where the navel is for the enteric brain. Then you move your hand up to the next space, right next door, and you're going to tap again. You're going to tap again. It doesn't have to be hard tapping. It doesn't work better the harder you tap. Okay, and then we're going to move forward again. And we're going to tap where we can find some skull to tap, the chest, and stomach, and then we finally come down to here. And we're going to tap, tap, and tap. Now we've got to do the rest of the brain, the two sides. So we put our hands there. Now we can't tap with both hands on, but we have the hands there, then we release one and tap 3 spots. Then we release this one and tap the 3 spots. And come back, relax for a second. While you're doing that, I suggest you take a few deep breaths. It just helps all the circuitry of the energies, etc. Now, if you take, this is something the whole family can do. And for kids, it's great. But with kids, you know, for me, my big hand, I don't have to do 1, 2, 3, 4 positions. I can usually do the average kid type of thing in 3 positions or sometimes 2 positions because I've got a big hand. Just so long as you are covering all the surface area of the brain. Okay? It's very simple. The only side effect can be reduction of stress and improvement in health. You cannot do any harm with this. And we suggest you do it on yourself and on your children, and even get them into the routine. Usually kids will like doing it because we know when they're stressed and uptight and not very antsy, you find I've seen the kids automatically do their own cortices to just calm down, get them to sleep, etc. So it's a technique that is a very valuable part of maintenance of healthcare. It's something you can do for yourself that is going to make a huge difference in reducing your stress levels and your quality of life. So give it a try. You can't do any harm with it, but if you do it for a while, you're going to see results.
All right, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.